Tick-tock, let's rock this joint. Hi everybody and welcome to Swedish Linux. Linux, the right way. Today we are going to talk about why Linux sucks as a desktop operating system. Everybody knows that Linux is the best server operating system around the world. And we know the entire internet basically runs on some kind of Linux server, including Apple and Microsoft's. But Linux still hasn't crossed the 2% barrier on desktop. And there must be a reason why. I mean, everybody talking about the Linux is the best, especially if you talk to the big Linux guys on YouTube or other online platforms. They're going to tell you that Linux is the gift from God to humanity, and everybody who doesn't know Linux is a sucker. Like Christ Titus, for example, or Switch to Linux, or some other of the dudes. But that's not the case at all, and I will explain you why. Because we need to talk on the people who doesn't have the computer as an interest, but barely use the computer as a tool. Meaning everybody from 10, 15 years old up to the 90s old grandma, those people we're talking about. And maybe a few other people who are a little bit more interested. But we will see why Linux sucks right after this. Welcome back. So, let's talk about it. But before we get into the deep reason why Linux sucks on desktop, let's see why. As you can see here, we are talking about one of the biggest Photoshop operating program. Photoshop, Lightroom, everybody knows that. And yes, there are similar programs, GIMP, and there are, for example, let's go to GIMP. GIMP is a good software. You can do most of the things that you can do on Adobe Photoshop. But the question is, why hasn't it breached and helped Linux go a bit bigger? Because it's all about standard. And I will explain you in a minute. I mean, look on this. Darktable is a very good concurrent to the Lightroom. And in some aspect, it's even better than Lightroom. And in other aspect, it's a little bit worse. But the question is, why hasn't it helped Linux to reach more than 1.9, 1.8% of the market? It is all about standards. In the desktop publishing market, it is all about Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Lightroom. And that's the problem, that people are so stuck in their wheel that they can't get out of it. And they don't want to learn something new. They won't use Lightroom, and that's it. And Lightroom doesn't exist on Linux. But why not use Darktable? I mean, Darktable in most of the areas are equal to Lightroom, and in some areas even better than Lightroom. I use it myself. So I do think professional can use it. And I see myself as a semi-professional photographer, and I use it every day. And it works really, really good. But there is another program causing the trouble in the Linux sphere, and that's Microsoft Office. Everybody knows about Word, Excel, but it doesn't exist on Linux. That's one of the major points that many people said, I can't switch to Linux because I don't have Word. But please, you have LibreOffice. And LibreOffice is as well very qualified. That was interesting. Let's go this way. That's interesting. Why doesn't... No, I don't need that. That's interesting. LibreOffice is offline. That's interesting. And, but I'll find another way. So, LibreOffice is equally as good as Microsoft Word. Yes, Microsoft Word is a little bit like a Switzerland knife. You have everything and more than you need, but really, you can do a lot of things with LibreOffice. Unfortunately, it doesn't work today, but let's continue. Basically, Word. People used Word for 20 years and they want to continue to use it. It doesn't exist on Linux, so they want to switch. Even there are equally as good software for Linux as it is. Another problem is a third problem. We are talking about drivers. For example, if I want to buy, for some reason, a dot matrix printer, I can forget it. It won't work on Linux. There are maybe some model, 1 or 2 models who will work, but most of them doesn't work. The same with scanner. Most of them won't work under Linux. You need to use Windows or Mac OS, and even some of them won't even work on Mac OS. You need to use Windows for some reason. And that's sad, because it's so easy to make a driver for a printer or for a scanner or for some other hardware to make it work with Linux. I mean, look at this. Dell. I would never buy a Dell, but in this particular session, I need to use, because Dell is one of the big dogs out there, except for System 76, HP, and other. They start to sell computers with Linux. And we're not talking about just free computers. Let's close that. We have plenty of computer. even workstations and mini computers, whatever you need. Look, there are 37 computers that you can use with Linux, if you so wish. So why aren't there any hardware? Third-part hardware, like printers, scanners, doesn't work. And that's one of the big problems for Linux, that we don't have drivers. And honestly, I have a printer that officially supports Linux, but still doesn't work on Linux. I will show you which printer it is. Canon LB 6200. No, now it's Swedish. I don't know why it chose Swedish, but okay. Yeah. And look. Come on. Look, it has drivers, but still under Manjaro it does not work. I'll show you. So let's see. Printers over here. Look, this is mine. And we have tried to make it work in Manjaro. And we tried different things, left and right, and I even reinstalled my computer several times just to clean everything. And it detects everything, and it doesn't work on Manjaro. I did manage to make it work on Ubuntu, but only on Ubuntu. All other doesn't work. And that's, for me, frustrating, because it is a Linux certified printer, meaning it should work on Linux, but it doesn't. That's another problem Linux people have. But some hardware doesn't work. But for example, my Samsung color laser printer works perfectly fine. I don't even need a driver, nothing. Even my Epson scanner works perfectly fine. But not my black and white double printer. So this is some of the problems we have in Linux, but some problem doesn't work. And for example, I want to buy a .NET printer. Let's see. Sorry, not .NET, .matrix printer. And it's impossible, because it doesn't support. Let's go. Oh, we got too far. Here. And 53 people know, and nobody give me a suggestion. Yes, I can make one Epson model to work, but it's just really a hassle. But on Windows, I just plug and play and it works straight out. I don't even need to install drivers because Microsoft Windows manages it itself. that kind of easy to use Linux need. So even Linux certified doesn't work, and that's too bad. For example, I want this one to work, but it's impossible. So why do I need to use Linux if I still need to boot up into Windows just to print? Duh. That's one of the problems. And this is a brand new printer. This is not some 20-year-old printer that nobody knows. This is a big selling matrix, dot matrix printer that sells. And they all not support. Yes, and every Linux fanatics will say, they don't support it. But did they talk to the manufacturer? Did they ask the manufacturer to make a Linux driver? Or did they talk to the Linux community to make a third-party driver? No. But they still say that Linux is the best of the best. So this is a few things why people won't go with Linux. Myself, I'm using both Linux. Manjaro is the only Linux I will use. And I use Windows 10. And the entire thing here you saw today is made on Windows. And I could as well have done it on Linux without any problem at all. But this is some of the problems Linux has. And until Linux fix that problem, or why not talk with the big manufacturers like Dell or Lenovo, who is as well making a big jump onto Linux. Let's see. Let's see. I don't want Sweden, I want USA. Let's see. And we have a couple of Linux machines that will work, computers that will work with Linux. Why not talk to them to collaborate with third parties? I mean, Oki, Epson, Canon, HP, they are all huge, big giant. It should be easy for them to work together to make a Linux driver, or at least standardize it to the extent that it should be work. But no, this is the problem with Linux. It's locking down to specific version or specific hardware units to make it work. And that is something people don't care. Majority of people in US buy their computer on Best Buy or Walmart or whatever you call it over there. They don't have this specific knowledge what to choose. Or some of them, like me, I build all my own computers. I never buy a complete computer because I want to have the best quality for the best price, which you don't get in pre-configured machine. And that's the problem. I know it because I have a computer interest, but most people don't have that. We don't want to tinker around in settings and manipulating drivers just to make something work. We just want to plug it in, push the power button on, and on the way. And that's why, as long as Linux can't catch up to that, to be that easy of use, sorry guys, Linux will be a 2% operating system. There is actually one more thing that Linux really have a problem with, or people have a problem with Linux. There are one more thing. This. People are scared to death when they see something like this. The interesting part is with today, the modern Linux, for example, Manjaro, Ubuntu, flavors, Fedora, OpenSUSE, whatever you want to call it, they all can be, most of the things you can do without the terminal, until the system, for some reason, hang or crash. Then the terminal might be the only solution to save it. And that's too scares the living crap out of most people, especially people who have no understanding or no interest in using computers and terminals. And that's why Linux have a problem. So, today we talked about several things actually. The lack of specific software. Yes, there are sometimes equal, not maybe even better software. Like for example, I'm using OBS and Kdenlive to edit all my videos and record all thing. And both of them are open source. Are they the best? That can be debatable. But they're really good enough for everyday use. It's not hard to set up or use it. But basically, software. Then we have the lack of hardware. I'm not talking about 20-year-old hardware, I'm talking about brand new hardware that's lacking drivers. And third, distribution of Linux systems like Dell, Lenovo, HP, System76, and so on. They all need to put their machines at Best Buy, Walmart, and whatever the retail stores that exist worldwide, that people can buy it straight off the shelf and use it. Then Linux may be used. But if there isn't any good software, then it doesn't matter how good the operating system is, because operating system without a software is like a car without the gas. Doesn't matter that you have 1200 horsepower under the hood, but you have no gas in the tank. Then it doesn't matter, it's the best car on paper, you can still not drive it. The same with Linux. If you don't have the software and you can't buy it, and you need at the shelf at Best Walmart, Best Buy, Walmart, and whatever it's called, or in Europe we have Lidl or Elgigant and other distributors, then Linux will never grow. So, this is a couple of the things that will be to solve for Linux in the near future. Because if not, macOS and Windows will grow and Linux will stay around 1.5–2%. And yes, some people say that, oh, we have the Chromebook and this lockdown version of Linux and it's growing. Yes, but still it doesn't go after the main problem: lack of software, lack of hardware, and lack of easy accessible to buy a Linux computer. And as long as these 3 points are not addressed, the Linux is going to suck. So thanks guys for tuning in on my channel. Please like and subscribe. It's really appreciated. And see you next time. Thanks.